The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days in Palermo. Evelina Rossi sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at the wrinkled notice in her hands. Final demand of payment. Her late father's debts had finally caught up to her. When the knock came, it wasn't a banker. It was Luca, a man in a black suit with the Moretti family crest on his cuff. His voice was polite but carried a threat underneath. "Mr. Moretti requests your presence. Tonight." Evelina followed him through the dim streets to a villa that looked more like a fortress. Inside, marble floors gleamed under gold chandeliers. Guards stood like statues, their eyes following her every step. And then she saw him, Matteo Moretti, the most feared man in Italy. Broad shoulders, cold gray eyes, and a scar that traced the edge of his jaw. His power filled the room before he even spoke. He didn't look at her right away. He poured himself a glass of wine and said quietly, "Your father owed me €500,000. He's dead. The debt remains." Her throat tightened. I don't have money, sir. But I can." He finally looked at her. "You can give me something else." Her heartbeat stumbled. "What do you mean?" Matteo leaned forward, his gaze burning through her fear. "A wife. My world demands loyalty, and loyalty demands blood ties. You'll become Mrs. Moretti. In return, your father's name stays clean, and you stay alive." Evelina stood frozen. A wife? To a man like him? It felt like a nightmare. "You have until midnight to decide," he said, rising. "But know this." He came close enough for her to feel his breath. "If you refuse, the debt will be collected another way." Hours later, trembling hands signed her name on the contract. The ink bled slightly like a wound that would never heal. Matteo took the papers, his expression unreadable. "Prepare yourself, cara mia. Tomorrow you become mine." As she left his office, Evelina didn't know which was stronger, her terror or the strange pull she felt toward the man who had just claimed her life. The church bells rang through the foggy morning, but there was no joy in them, only finality. Evelina stood before the altar in a white dress she hadn't chosen, her trembling fingers hidden beneath lace gloves. Around them, the pews were filled not with family or friends, but with men in dark suits, Matteo's men. Matteo Moretti stood tall beside her, wearing a tailored black suit that fit him like sin. His expression was unreadable, but his presence was suffocating. When the priest spoke the words, "Do you take this man?" Evelina's lips quivered. Her voice came out in a whisper barely heard. "I do." Matteo's reply was firm, possessive. "I do." When the ring slid onto her finger, she felt the weight of chains, not gold. The moment the priest declared them husband and wife, Matteo turned toward her, his hand slipping around her waist, pulling her close. His lips brushed her ear as he whispered, low and dangerous, "Your body belongs to me until I have my sons." Her breath caught. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. He didn't smile. He only tightened his grip slightly, as if warning her that there was no escape. After the ceremony, Matteo guided her out of the church, his hand firm on the small of her back. Paparazzi flashes lit up the steps. They saw a glamorous union, not a woman being sold to a king of darkness. In the car, silence filled the air. Evelina stared out the window, the city blurring past. Matteo finally spoke, his voice quiet but heavy. "Do not run. Do not disobey. I will protect you, Evelina, but you will obey me." She turned to him, tears threatening to fall. "And if I don't?" His gray eyes met hers. "Then you'll learn why they call me the Devil of Palermo." The car stopped in front of a grand seaside villa. He opened the door, extending a hand that looked both dangerous and strong. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Moretti." Evelina took his hand, not out of choice but because she no longer had one. The villa overlooked the dark waves of the Amalfi coast, the sea roaring like a warning. Evelina followed Matteo inside, her heart pounding beneath the silk of her wedding gown. Every step echoed against marble floors and golden walls, a palace that felt more like a cage. Matteo dismissed his guards with a wave. The door shut behind them, leaving only silence and the faint crackle of the fireplace. He loosened his tie, watching her with those unreadable gray eyes. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "Because you wanted a wife." A flicker of something, amusement? Sadness? Passed across his face. "I wanted loyalty. A name that can't be used against me. And maybe," his gaze dropped to her lips, "a son." Evelina's breath hitched. "So that's all I am to you? A means to an heir." He stepped closer. The air between them tightened. "You're my wife," he murmured. "That makes you everything." When he reached out, his fingers brushed her cheek, gentle, almost reverent. She flinched anyway. He paused, lowering his hand slowly. I won't take what's not given, he said, voice rough but controlled. But understand this, Evelina, your place is by my side. Your safety depends on it. His words confused her. He was supposed to be cruel, yet there was restraint in him, danger laced with something unspoken. She whispered, Why me? Matteo turned away, staring into the fire. Because you're the only one I could take without hating myself for it. That night he didn't touch her. He gave her the master bedroom and disappeared to his study. Evelina sat on the bed, staring at the ocean through the window, realizing her world had changed forever. She should have felt relief. But when she closed her eyes, she could still feel his breath on her skin, the power in his voice, the warmth of his hand. Something dark and unfamiliar stirred inside her, not fear but curiosity. And as thunder rolled outside, Evelina whispered into the emptiness, Who are you, Matteo Moretti? Days passed in uneasy quiet. Evelina moved through the villa like a ghost, her footsteps soft against the marble floors. Matteo was always busy, phone calls, meetings, men in suits coming and going with hard faces and hushed voices. She told herself to keep her distance, but curiosity kept pulling her back to him. He was ruthless with everyone, yet strangely patient with her. He never raised his voice, never forced a touch. Still, the air between them burned whenever he looked her way. One afternoon she followed him. He had said he was meeting business partners, but instead, Matteo drove alone to a secluded hilltop cemetery. Hidden behind an olive tree, Evelina watched him kneel before a small white headstone. He placed a bouquet of lilies and whispered something she couldn't hear. For a long moment, the cold mafia boss she knew was gone. In his place stood a man, broken, haunted. When he finally returned to the car, she was waiting by the gate. His expression darkened when he saw her. You followed me. I had to know who you really are, she said, her voice trembling. Who was she? Matteo's jaw tightened. He turned his gaze toward the horizon. My wife, he said quietly. And my son. Her breath caught. What happened? His eyes, usually steel gray, softened for a heartbeat. A betrayal. A car bomb meant for me. I buried them both on a Monday. Evelina's chest ached. Sorry? He met her eyes again, and this time there was no cruelty. Only pain. Don't be. In my world, love is weakness. I swore I'd never feel it again. The drive back was silent. Yet something had shifted, a thread of understanding woven between their wounds. Evelina realized his obsession with having sons wasn't just about power. It was about ghosts. That night, she stood outside his study door, listening to the low rumble of his voice as he cursed his enemies. She wanted to hate him, but instead she whispered softly to herself. He's not a monster. He's just a man who's forgotten how to feel. The days after their confrontation were different. Matteo no longer ignored her presence. He acknowledged her with brief glances, small nods, quiet gestures that carried meaning. Evelina began to see glimpses of the man buried beneath the title mafia boss. One morning she found him in the courtyard, shirt sleeves rolled, helping a gardener fix a broken fountain. The sight startled her, the ruthless Matteo Moretti, kneeling in the dirt, hands wet, jaw relaxed. You shouldn't get your hands dirty, she said before she could stop herself. He looked up, amusement flickering in his gray eyes. I've had worse on them. Something about his honesty disarmed her. She knelt beside him, steadying the stone base. Their fingers brushed, just once, but the touch sent a jolt through her chest. That night, over dinner, she finally asked what had been haunting her since the wedding. Why didn't you just let me go? You could have found anyone. He studied her across the candlelight. Because I don't trust anyone. He leaned forward, his tone softening. But when I saw you that night, scared, proud, desperate to protect your father's name, I saw something pure. Something this world hasn't touched yet. Evelina's throat tightened. And you decided to ruin it yourself? His smile faded. Maybe. Or maybe I wanted to see if purity could survive beside the devil. The silence that followed was heavy. She wanted to hate him for his arrogance, but the rawness in his words broke something inside her. Later that night, when thunder rolled across the sea, she heard shouting from Matteo's office. A phone slammed, glass breaking. She rushed in without thinking. He stood by the window, eyes burning. They're threatening the family again, he growled. If I don't give them an heir soon, they'll take everything. My name, my men, my life. Evelina's fear melted into something unexpected. Empathy. She stepped closer, her hand trembling as it touched his arm. Then let me help you, she whispered. Matteo turned slowly, his expression softening as he looked at her. For the first time he didn't see a contract or a possession, he saw her. And in that fragile silence, his walls began to crack. The storm came without warning, heavy rain slamming against the villa windows, wind howling through the corridors like a beast. Evelina stood by the fire, arms wrapped around herself, waiting for Matteo to return from another tense meeting. When the door finally burst open, he looked wild, drenched, furious, desperate. His men had betrayed him. Rivals had struck a deal behind his back. The empire he'd built was trembling. She approached him carefully. Matteo. Don't, he snapped, slamming his glass down. You don't understand what it means to lose control in my world. Her voice broke through the thunder. Then teach me. He froze. She took a step closer. You protect me like I'm fragile, but I'm already broken, Matteo. Maybe I can take some of your pain. Something inside him shattered. He turned, eyes blazing, and before she could breathe, he pulled her against him. Their lips crashed together, anger, fear, and longing colliding all at once. Evelina's fingers clutched his shirt as he lifted her onto the desk, the firelight flickering over their faces. His hands trembled against her skin, a man trying to hold back everything he'd buried for years. I told myself I'd never touch you, he whispered against her neck. That I'd never lose control again. Her reply came soft but certain. Then don't hold back. When his mouth met hers again, it wasn't about power or debt, it was hunger, raw and real. He kissed her like a man drowning, and she kissed him like she was finally breathing for the first time. The world outside raged, but inside, everything went still. Later, when the storm had quieted, Evelina lay in his arms, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her cheek. For once, Matteo looked peaceful, his armor stripped away. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You shouldn't have come into my world, he murmured. She smiled faintly. Maybe I was always meant to. For the first time since the day they met, Matteo Moretti didn't feel cursed. He felt alive. Peace never lasts long in Matteo's world. Days after the storm, the villa seemed calmer, almost normal. Evelina began to paint again, filling the empty halls with color. Matteo even smiled sometimes, a rare, fleeting thing. But beneath the calm, war was brewing. One night, while they dined alone, Matteo's phone buzzed. He frowned, reading the message. His expression changed, a coldness she hadn't seen since the wedding. What is it? Evelina asked. He stood, already reaching for his gun. The Rossi name. Someone's using it to threaten me. They know about you. Her blood turned to ice. Who? Before he could answer, the lights went out. A gunshot shattered the window. Matteo pushed her to the ground, his body covering hers. Stay down, he barked. Chaos erupted, his guards shouting, bullets slicing through glass. When it was over, the villa smelled of smoke and blood. Matteo's men found a note pinned to the broken wall. Return the girl. Or bury her. That night, Matteo locked every door in the house and doubled the guards. Evelina saw the fury in his eyes, not just anger but terror. They're not after me, she said softly. They want to hurt you. He looked at her, jaw clenched. They'll touch you over my dead body. But the next morning, his threat became prophecy. Evelina stepped into the courtyard, and the world went black. When she woke, her wrists were bound, her head throbbing. The room smelled of gasoline and mold. A familiar voice echoed from the shadows. Vincenzo Romano, Matteo's old rival. So this is the bride, Vincenzo sneered, gripping her chin. The woman who tamed the devil. Let's see what he'll give to get you back. Evelina's fear burned into defiance. You'll regret this, she spat. Vincenzo smirked. Oh, I'm counting on it. Back at the villa, Matteo tore through his office, eyes bloodshot, voice hoarse with rage. Find her, he roared. Search every inch of this city. The devil of Palermo was no longer just feared. He was unleashed. And for the first time, Matteo's enemies realized they hadn't taken his weakness. They'd taken his heart. Matteo hadn't slept in 2 days. His men scoured every street, every dock, every warehouse in Palermo, but there was no sign of her. The only thing keeping him standing was rage, and the promise he'd made to himself. If she dies, I'll burn this city to ash. When a trembling informant finally whispered a location, an abandoned mansion outside the city, Matteo didn't wait for backup. He went alone. The night was heavy with fog. He moved through the halls like a shadow, silencer in hand. 2 guards stood outside a locked door. 2 shots. 2 bodies fell. Inside, Evelina sat tied to a chair, her lips split, her dress torn. When the door creaked open, she flinched until she saw him. Matteo, her voice cracked, barely a whisper. He dropped the gun, crossing the room in seconds. His hands shook as he untied her ropes. I'm here, amore mio. You're safe now. Her tears came then, not from fear but from relief. I knew you'd come. He cupped her face gently, but his eyes were wild. I'm sorry. I should have protected you. I'll never. A noise behind them. Vincenzo stepped out of the shadows, smirking, pistol raised. Touching, he sneered. Let's end the love story here. Matteo turned faster than thought. 2 gunshots echoed. One missed. One didn't. Vincenzo hit the ground, his arrogance dying with him. Matteo staggered, blood seeping through his shoulder. Evelina caught him before he fell. You're hurt. He laughed softly, wincing. Not enough to stop me from taking you home. She pressed her forehead to his, her tears mingling with rain leaking through the ceiling. You're insane. He smiled faintly. Only for you. When Matteo carried her out into the storm, his shirt soaked with his own blood, the night seemed to bow before them, the devil and the woman who made him human. Hours later, back at the villa, the doctor whispered that Evelina's faintness wasn't just shock, it was early pregnancy. Matteo froze, every muscle trembling. When Evelina whispered, "You're going to be a father," he broke for the first time. The devil of Palermo fell to his knees and wept. Months passed and the violence faded into memory. The villa, once filled with gunfire and fear, now echoed with softer sounds, laughter, whispered conversations, the rhythmic heartbeat of new life growing inside Evelina. Matteo never left her side. Every morning he walked her through the garden, one hand protectively on her back, the other brushing her hair from her face. He was still the feared mafia boss to the outside world, but to her he had become something else entirely. When labor came, it was storming again. Matteo paced the hall like a man waiting for a verdict, his knuckles white, his heart a drumbeat of prayer and terror. Then a cry. Small, fragile, but alive. The doctor stepped out with a smile. A son. Matteo froze. Then he entered the room like a man walking into sunlight for the first time. Evelina lay on the bed, exhausted but glowing, their child wrapped in her arms. He stopped at the edge of the bed, afraid to touch them, afraid he might break the moment. Evelina looked up and smiled through her tears. He has your eyes. Matteo sank to his knees, taking their son in his trembling hands. The child's tiny fingers curled around his thumb, and for the first time Matteo felt peace. Real peace. He pressed a kiss to Evelina's forehead. You've given me more than an heir, he whispered. You've given me my soul back. Days later the council summoned him. The old men demanded he continue the bloodline, ensure the family's future. When Matteo returned home that night, his expression was unreadable. Evelina, rocking their baby, asked quietly, "What did they say?" He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. His breath warmed her ear. "They want more heirs," he murmured. "So it seems." His voice softened, teasing yet tender. "Your body still belongs to me until I have my sons." Evelina turned, eyes glimmering with amusement. "Is that a threat, Mr. Moretti?" He smiled for the first time in days. "No, amore. It's a promise." And in that moment she knew, the devil of Palermo had finally found heaven in her arms. Years passed and the name Moretti became legend, not just whispered in fear but in respect. The empire Matteo built stood stronger than ever, not through blood alone, but through the quiet power of the woman beside him. Evelina had changed. The timid girl who once trembled under vows and threats was gone. In her place stood a woman of grace and steel, wife, mother, and the quiet queen of the Italian underworld. Their villa overflowed with life now. 2 little boys raced through the halls, laughter echoing off marble walls that once knew only silence. Matteo often paused to watch them, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He still ruled with an iron hand, but only she could calm the storms inside him. One evening, as the sun melted over the Amalfi coast, Evelina found him on the balcony, cigar in hand, lost in thought. She slipped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his back. "Thinking about the old days?" she teased. He chuckled low and rough. "Thinking about how far we've come. I took you by force once." He turned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Now I can't imagine breathing without you." She smiled softly. "You wanted sons. Now you have 2, and a wife who tamed the devil." He laughed quietly, tracing her lips with his thumb. "No, amore. You didn't tame me. You became my equal." Down below, their children played by the fountain she'd helped rebuild. The same one they'd once knelt beside, hands dirty, hearts uncertain. Matteo drew her close, his voice warm against her ear. You gave me everything I didn't know I needed. My sons. My peace. My reason. Evelina's eyes softened. And you gave me something too. He raised an eyebrow. What's that? Her smile was serene. The kind of love that can survive even hell. He kissed her then, slow and certain, the world around them fading into gold. From debt and darkness to power and devotion, their love had rewritten destiny. The devil of Palermo had found his redemption, and Evelina Rossi Moretti reigned, not as his possession but as his queen.